please introduce yourself?
Hey, my name's Tate. I study at the Uni of Wollongong and I'm doing communications and digital media.
What was an issue you have faced?
So one of the biggest issues in my life was I went through a really big rough patch in my relationship with my mum, and yeah, it definitely affected us at the time, but I think it's also just the lasting effects of it as well.
What kind of relationship did you have with your mum?
Well, it's an interesting one. So, when everybody argues with their parents sometimes, but with me and my mum, it escalated really quickly, especially during year 12 for me, which was last year. It got to the point where, things like we'd argue over tiny things, like if I hadn't made my bed in the morning, and then, I'd turn up that afternoon and I wouldn't even be able to get back into the house. So we wouldn't talk to each other. If she was cooking dinner, I'd have to cook my own separately, all that kind of stuff. It was just, we just did not get along for a while, I think.
How and when did this start?
Yeah, so I'll start with the how. I think it was a bit of a combination, really. There was obviously stress on my end, end of school, being a teenager as well, thinking you're always right, that sort of stuff, which by the way I am. But it was also my mum had breast cancer, and when she had the operations and stuff, the mastectomy, they gave her these tablets. I'm not quite sure they worked, but they were hormone cancelling sort of things, and it just made her, I guess moody is the right word. And so my dad and I like to call them kill the family pills, because it just made her very angry all the time over like really little things, and then that was not helped by the fact that I would argue every little thing, and so it just escalated during like end of year 11, year 12, and just sort of really peaked at the end of year 12, so probably around September, November sort of time last year, I'd say.
And did you do anything to help you get through this situation during the time?
Yeah, there was a few things I did, and definitely all questionable though. I'll explain that in a second. So things like I distanced myself a lot from my mum for a long while in there, and that was good because it means that, obviously if we're talking to each other less, we're arguing less, which means we fight less, but it also means that we had nothing to do with each other. And it's like my mum, I should have something to do with her, and it just made this really awkward gap between us that's been really hard to fill since. But apart from that, it was just sort of try to push through, really.
Is your relationship still like that now?
No, not really. Of course we still argue sometimes, but after the HSC finished, I was a lot less aggressive, I guess is the right word, and my mum also came off of the tablets at around about the same time, and so we just sort of clicked, and our relationship's definitely a lot better in the fact that we don't fight, but as I mentioned before, we still have that sort of big gap between us in that we still talk, but we don't quite have that mother-son relationship back yet.
And what kind of advice would you give someone that is having a bad relationship with their mother now?
Yeah, I think just a bad relationship with a parent in general. Of course it depends on the situation, but what I can say is don't do what I did. Yeah, getting myself out of the situation and avoiding my mum was great and it worked at the time, but it's shit now, and we're still trying to build back up the relationship that was broken down. But apart from that, all I can really say is, I don't know what kind of circumstance other people would be going through, but if there is an end of it in sight, so like for me, I knew at the end of the HSC when my mum was also coming off the tablets, it would probably get better, and I just sort of grabbed onto that and clung to it, and just that idea that I knew it was going to get better, I think is something that anybody going through a similar thing should try to think about.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
No worries.